Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Ben Data, co-chair of DSW. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. This community has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade, and this week we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors, whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe. Welcome to Denver Startup
Downtown
Week.
Denver
I'm Ben
Partnership.
Data, co-chair of DSW, Hotel Engine. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup. And our track sponsors. This community has made all of the great content you're hearing today possible. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past, growth track, and dream big for the future. Developer track, Quizlet. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our designer track, sponsor, Battery 621. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, People Track, Amazon, exactly, and our title and Spotlight Events sponsor, leadership.
Hey, Denver Startup Week volunteers, just wanted to let you know you've got 2 videos running with 2 sets of audio.
Hotel Engine. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup. And our track sponsor. This community has made all the.
Hey, everybody, stand by. Technical difficulties. We're trying to figure them out right now, but welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And we've just got a little message from Denver Startup Week sponsors, and then we'll get rolling.
Or maybe that was the intro, huh?
That might have been it. Denver Startup Week hosts, let us know if you want to break in with that video again. Otherwise, we'll kind of get rolling. I think we have a good amount of participants already here. If you'd love to throw your video on, I will tell you, Ron and I love to see your faces and get you all involved in the conversation that we have to talk about today. So feel free to do that. And if you can't, hi, Carrie, thanks for waving. Good to see you all today. Welcome to, what is it, day 2 now of Denver Startup Week. How many of you have been going to talks, discussions, panels, workshops already this week? All in full gear. Well, we want to thank you. Peter, thank you. I know you're volunteering to help us out from Denver Startup Week. Thank you to Denver Startup Week for giving Ron and I the platform to open up this conversation. It's a very vulnerable conversation, right? We're talking about imposter syndrome, which is about fears and anxiety for some. So we want to thank you as well. We got, I think, somewhere over 400 signups for this. So thank you for taking the time out to show your face and come in and get in on this very difficult conversation in life, but absolutely most certainly for entrepreneurship and startup companies, right? We are so excited and humbled, like I said, for so many people to gather. Wow, I mean, what a way to make some change. And it starts here in this room for 90 minutes. But I challenge you throughout to take some of the things we're talking about, some of the things you learn from us, learn from each other, or the ideas that percolate in your heads during this talk, and take them back to the people that surround you. Because this discussion needs to get a lot louder. And you can take it home to your kids. If your teachers, take it into your classrooms. If your leaders or entrepreneurs or business owners, take it into your workplaces. So Ron and I, who you'll meet in just a few moments, we're both from Boulder, Colorado. We live and work here, so that's where we're tuning in from today. I would love for you to throw in the chat box where you're signing in from. Those of you that are listening to us live on YouTube Live, we can't see you. We're not tuned into YouTube, but thank you for joining us as well. Throw into the chat box where you are tuning in from so we can just kind of see, since we're on Zoom, we could be anywhere, right? All right. Let's create some change for the next 85-ish minutes. And let me start with a question. What if I told you that imposter syndrome, as you know it today, in this moment, was completely and utterly unnecessary? Would you believe me? Would you say, Terry, you're crazy? What if I told you that we could literally work, and it is some work, to get that pesky thing literally kicked out of our way and out of our lives, and feel good about everything we do, even when we mess up, because we all do. Can't fix that. Sorry, you're in the wrong webinar for that one. But even when we mess up, we feel good about what we do. And here's a really good one for you workaholics out there. What we don't do. We want to feel good about what we choose not to do as well, right? So if this sounds a little too guru-ish, hang with me. There's a lot that we're going to get into when it comes to science of the brain as well. So let me give you a little taste of what I'm talking about. And we're gonna do this little exercise really quick. You need a pen and paper. You can grab a sticky note. You can, you can grab your phone. You can type it out on your laptop. I would prefer if you could put it on a physical piece of paper of some sort, scratch paper, if you're trying to avoid killing more trees. And I want you to take the next 30, 45 seconds and force yourself to be dead serious and write down at least 2 to 5 of your superpowers. Take about 30 to 45 seconds. It's not a very long time. And get at least 2 down.
It's going to be hard if you haven't thought about it before.
It's not always an easy task.
See, when we have when we see that video up, we have proof. I know you're doing something. You may be doodling, but you're doing something.
Which is great, right? This is how we make change. We actually do some of the little work. So this is a really good one. And again, what you're doing can be transferred to your kids, to the people that work for you, the friends that are in your lives. So this is a great exercise to do with all of them as well. All right, wrap up what you're writing. Highly encourage you to do more time, spend more time on this. All right, set that piece of paper aside. Please never throw it away. Never, never, never. But set it aside from now. So what are we here to do today? A couple of things. But the big one is Ron and I are here to help you and us, because we're still learning, understand more about imposter syndrome, so that we can turn it into something helpful, because it's not usually, and productive. And we want you to be able to use it at work, at home, when you're alone in your thoughts. It's for every moment of your day. And then again, I'm going to keep reiterating this, pay it forward. What you learn, share with others, because the way you have suffered through it, which we all have, everyone else is. So today we'll talk about some neuroscience. We'll break out some quick tools for you toward the end that you can use immediately starting today, tomorrow, to combat imposter syndrome. And then we're going to go into and touch briefly on some deeper ideas that actually can make real long-term lasting change in this world. Okay. But we do need your help. That chat box is our friend. We have a little bit too many people on the line to open it up for you to talk a lot throughout this webinar, but use the chat box instead. Let that be your voice. We'll ask a lot of questions, anything you want to share, especially if Ron and I leave something out that you have found helpful. Teach everyone else, but share as much as you feel comfortable with, because that is how we get change going. So my co-host Ron Durham today, who you're going to meet in just a moment, he and I have been working together for a few years to bring better performance, mindset, and vulnerability and change to entrepreneurs and students. And we believe that we break through all of our limitations in life by doing hard things. So before we talk about ourselves, let's do something hard. My students that are here, shout out to all my students from the entrepreneurship class at CU. They know where I'm going with this, and they're like, oh no, she's doing it again.
Ron knows where you're going too.
Ron knows too. I want to talk about push-ups. How many of you love push-ups? And the rest of you probably hate them. Some of you will find them hard. Some of you will find them easy. Some of you have no idea because you've maybe never done one before, which was me many years ago too. We like to equate physical push-ups, which is doing something hard, to mental push-ups, which is what we're talking about today. Both of them require repetition and practice to get better at them. And it does work. I know for a fact with my own push-ups, it does get better. So I want to challenge you for a minute. Those of you that are at work, you might embarrass yourselves, but that's okay. Those of you that have space where you're at, I am going to welcome you to join us for a handful of push-ups before we get started. Plus it's like that 2 o'clock, like, oh my God, I need to wake up and I got this 90-minute webinar with this woman that's making me do push-ups. All right, so detach from your computers. Let's just take a minute. Let's get the blood flow in our brain and let's see what it's like to do some hard push-ups if you're willing to buy into this really quick.
Lavondalin's smiling.
I know, right? She's like, I'm not doing it. All right, we're gonna do it too. Ron, are you ready?
I think I'm ready.
All right, I'm detaching. We're all detaching and we're gonna do some push-ups.
And if you're not going to do push-ups, just go off screen and I don't want to do something else, then come back.
Pretend, right? Here we go. Do like 5 or 10.
All right. Whew, I'm breathing hard now. All right. All of you that just jumped off screen and, I don't know, checked your phone.
That's okay.
No, I'm kidding. I love it.
Shame you.
It looks like all of you guys were participating. That's awesome.
Hopefully that felt not too bad in the middle of the afternoon. And the good thing is some of you, how many of you are like, that did not feel good, Tara? That did not feel good at all, right? That's, yes, Ken, I'm with you. You know what? Here's the thing. Part of what we're going to talk about here and you guys taking this discussion forward with other people is not going to feel good either at first. I promise you, just like push-ups, this discussion gets easier within yourself and with other people. So I like to equate physical push-ups to mental push-ups constantly, and I really want you to keep that in your brain, right? We're going to ask you to go a little deep and to be open-minded today, but I'm also going to tell you we have no magical cure. There's no magical cure to the topic we're talking about, but there are push-ups, mental push-ups that we can do. And that's how we're going to make some serious change to our behavior, which all, as we probably all know, takes persistence and repetition. So here we go. Imposter syndrome, forging your unique value proposition in this world, which is a topic that I have been in love with for years. And Ron and I have been working with in corporations and with students for a long time. I am Tara O'Brien. I am so humbled and pleased to be here with all of you. I recognize a lot of you and have worked with you in the past, so it's great to see your faces. Thanks for coming and supporting us. We are excited to get started, and I want to stop talking for a few minutes and introduce you to my very good friend who I've worked with for several years now. We have made a lot of progress in what we've worked on and also within ourselves. And so I want to introduce you to my co-host and friend, Ron Durham.
Thank you, Tara. As Tara said, my name is Ron Durham Jr., and I was scanning through the people on here, and I see some familiar faces, so I would echo what Tara's saying. Thank you for joining us. I also want to say we were very humbled that we get so many responses for this. I think it really resonates that this is a topic that a lot of people relate to and maybe even struggle with. So that's going to be fun. So who am I? A little bit of my background. I spent 18 years as a mechanical engineer working in the data storage industry. Made a pivot to teaching full-time at the University of Colorado in the engineering management program. And if you're not familiar with that, think of an MBA for engineers and people that work in technical fields. I am also a product of that program. I did graduate from that program and now teach in it. And I also do the coaching and consulting with Tara through Forging Metal Academy. And that's why we're here today. And so a little bit of my background is I've got a little bit of a crazy, what I call life resume. I built an airplane, was the test pilot on its maiden voyage. I played semi-professional baseball at Coors Field in front of 30,000 fans. I spent one season as a rodeo bull rider. I've completed a 140.6 mile Ironman triathlon, and I've also run 50 miles 3 times. Crazy experiences, but what do each one of those have in common? In every single one of them, I felt like an imposter. So this is a topic that I can relate to. It is something I've lived with my whole life. I'm not here to say I've exterminated it. I've come a long ways with it, and what we're going to share with you today is going to help you manage it better as well. So I'm excited, quite honestly, to kind of hand the reins back to Tara, and she's going to guide us through this, and I think I'm going to be learning right along with all of you.
Thanks so much, Ron. For me, I will say that I have Ron beat in doing difficult things in my life because I was a high school teacher once.
That's got, outside of being a parent, that's going to be the hardest job ever.
Yes. So I've been working here in Colorado for the last 5 years. I moved from San Francisco, and I'm not from San Francisco, but that's where I was previously. The first half of my career I spent as a storyteller. I fell in love with storytelling. The power of story in so many different ways is everything, I think. And so I went from being a journalist for the first half of my career to becoming an entrepreneur, succeeding right off the bat and failing miserably. So I know what failure is like. I know how hard it is for entrepreneurs. I know it can be debilitating. It was for me for a certain amount of time. And then I went on to do a lot of teaching in entrepreneurship and consulting and working one-on-one with entrepreneurs, because I realized that's probably not, I help other people better than I build my own companies. So what I learned through all of that in teaching both at the University in Colorado Boulder and also at Boomtown Accelerators in Boulder, working with entrepreneurs, is it doesn't matter what you do. Even if you are a stay-at-home parent or a high school teacher, story is everything. And storytelling to other people, who we are, what we're good at, how we can help them, what help we need, what products we're selling, the pitch to investors, it doesn't matter what you're telling. Story is so important to make impact. And it's very hard for us to tell our own stories. Ron knows that it has been a very hard struggle for me to tell my own. So
it's hard twisting her arm.
But it's so valuable and important to make impact on this planet, which is what we all, along with the millennials and the Gen Zs, want to do, right? We all want to make impact. Well, let me tell you, storytelling to other people is just as important as the story that we're telling ourselves. And we make up some serious crap in our heads, let me tell you. That is unnecessary. And imposter syndrome is one of them. So let's talk about what imposter syndrome looks like. You're saying, what is it? Have I had it? I'm not sure. I think I have. What does it mean, right? Have you ever felt any of these feelings? Have you ever felt that you didn't belong somewhere? A new job, a new school, a classroom, a group of friends? Have you ever thought you didn't deserve whatever you got? I mean, the sky's the limit on that one, right? What about feeling like a fake or a fraud, which is the actual definition for imposter syndrome, but it goes way beyond that. The fear of feeling found out. Overwhelm, burnout, exhaustion. Who all is feeling that over the last 2 years, right? This can lead to massive anxiety, sleep problems, depressed feelings. This is all tied to imposter syndrome. Keep going, Ron. We got a lot. Physical problems. The digestive issues was when I had to start taking a look at my imposter syndrome, right? We can start feeling edgy. Unable to get a good night's sleep, like I said, that is a big one, weighed down by our to-do lists that we're not checking off, right? We'll talk more about that. Lack of motivation. This is a big one that comes up, especially with our consultant or our coaching clients. It's hard to get motivated again. Yeah, no kidding. We're all suffering from that. Imposter syndrome plays a part. How about the need to be a perfectionist, or we get distracted easily? And just any of this, feeling fearful, time management is a mess. I don't want to be social. I hate my job. I'm underpaid. All of these things can tie back to imposter syndrome. And I put them all up here. There's tons more. This is just a quick look because there's so much that fits under that bubble. That's why we got to fix it. That's why we got to change it.
Tara, let me jump in real quick. You know, this is Tara's expertise, and so a little bit of this is new to me. And when I look at this list, I probably wouldn't associate all of that with imposter syndrome. So I think maybe the takeaway, at least for me, is there's a lot here going on that maybe I never associated with imposter syndrome before. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that is imposter syndrome, but if you're seeing anything that's on this screen, that might be a clue to you to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's imposter syndrome going on here that I didn't realize.
And I'm expanding my screen. I want to see everybody's faces. You don't have to share if you don't want to. Like I said, we're only in the beginning of a vulnerable conversation, but has anybody felt any of these things before or know someone that has? Right? This messes with our lives, right? It lets us not be our best person. So
we should do this a different way. Raise your hand if you've never felt it.
Oh. That's a good question.
Because we're going to talk about that later, and I think that's a myth. I think it's like a unicorn.
That's good. All right. What we're going to cover today, just so you kind of have an outline of what you're going to get out of this. Imposter syndrome, what is it? I'm not going to go into the deep reaches of it, but it was coined as a concept by researchers back in 1978. And as we kind of went through the years, people said, well, imposter syndrome, that sounds like a disease, right? It sounds like a mental illness. It is not. This is not a mental illness. This is not a disease. This is not something that only he or she or I or everybody else is afflicted by, but not this group over here because they're better. They deserve what they get. No, we pretty much all suffer from it, as we all saw. And we call it also imposter phenomenon to get rid of that syndrome. So you might see both of those interchangeable. We're going to talk about what it is. We're also going to go into who gets it, right? And then following, obviously, behind that is why. Why do we get it? Why does this happen? Is it just a bunch of malarkey? Not necessarily. The costs to ourselves, but also the costs to our employees at work. For those of you that have people underneath you, this costs a lot at work, like actual money. So tune into that. And then the big one, how do we fix it? I know that's what you're waiting for, right? So we're going to dig into some of that while we're here with you today.
All right. So I was kind of, maybe I was prepping you for this slide. One of the things that comes out of the research is that 70% of people are going to feel or have felt imposter syndrome in their lives. And I think to myself, is that number, I think that's crazy. I think it's way too low. I tell you, Tara and I co-host a podcast, and we've talked to a lot of people that would easily be called elite performers. They're very successful. And, you know, whenever the topic comes up of imposter syndrome across the board, 100% of them will say, yeah, I've felt that. So I'm just in this weird category of I want to meet the 30% that are out there that say I've never felt this. And so if you're one of those, maybe you send me an email because I'd love to talk to you. But here's the thing, 7 out of 10, that's still a lot, right? It's way more than half. So 7 out of 10 are going to feel this in their lives. And more than likely, because of the topic that we're talking about here, I would say most of our audience is probably saying, yeah, I'm in that 70%, right? Why would you come to a webinar on imposter syndrome if you never felt it or suffered from it? So I think most of us are in the 70%. But here's the thing, which is kind of interesting, and I want to pick your brain on this. The number goes up to 84% for a certain group. Most of you, I mean, we're at Denver Startup Week, right? And so most of you are probably entrepreneurs or are thinking of being entrepreneurs. And so a lot of you are going to fall into the category of that 84%. Entrepreneurs suffer from this at a little bit higher rate than the average person walking the street. And so in the chat box, I'm going to ask you, Why do you think that is? Why do you think that group, that subgroup, feels imposter syndrome at a little bit higher rate than the rest of people? What do you think's going on there?
I like it. Already we're getting some really great stuff in the chat box. If you're not following the chat box, that's like half the value of this session here today. So
Way
checking
more
out
than
what
half.
other way more than half, fair enough. That is, I highly, highly encourage. This is how we normalize what's going on in the world, because imposter syndrome, we think we're the only ones that have it, and that's just not true. Oh, I like that. I think it's because we have to keep explaining why to people, right? And you're like, God, if I keep getting why, if I have to tell them why, it's almost like getting a no, right? In sales. And that can make you feel, yes, big time imposter syndrome. Oh, tons of vulnerability. Yes, yes. The day we all embrace vulnerability as an amazing thing will be a happy day for Tara. I love it. Keep them coming. Why do entrepreneurs? I love this. This is really great stuff. All right, let's move on to what it is. Imposter syndrome, what it is, and how does it kind of show up, right? This is a big one. And I have found that this is one of my pieces over COVID, putting off important projects, right? Which is going to tie into procrastination, which we're going to talk about today. That's how imposter syndrome can show up. Or that's one way. Keep us going, Ron. I think we've got a couple others there. Writing success off as a fluke or luck, which you saw on a previous slide. This is a big one because I hear it all the time. Oh, we just got that sale because we're lucky. Or, oh, we just got that, we finalized our round because I guess we're just lucky. Or, oh, it only happened once, it'll never happen again. I hear that a lot, and I think it's a default response.
And I would add, closely related to this is something that comes out of psychology called minimizing. And whenever, I can tell you, I used to suffer from this a lot. If somebody gave me a compliment, I would always have a reason of why I didn't deserve that compliment. And so I had to learn, and I did this with some coaching, of just say thank you. And so I think, pay attention to that inner dialogue. Pay attention to, if you're minimizing your success, the things that are happening for you. If you're minimizing that, maybe that's a clue that you are maybe delving into the world of imposter syndrome.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a good one. This is one that kind of breaks my heart because I think we all have our unique value. We do. Whether you want to believe it or not, I'm here to tell you that you do. And when we don't express that in the world is missing out on so much, whether it's parenting or it's giving advice to people and helping them, or bringing your idea from the ideation stage to the execution stage, which is a big one. How many of you, even those with your video off, just raise your hand? Is it so hard to say, I love ideating, but actually executing is so hard, right? So we don't speak up with our ideas. It's so true. And I'm guilty myself as well.
Yeah, let me impress upon you. A lot of my work is with undergraduates, and they think that when they're getting their first job out of school, they go, well, my ideas can't be good ones because I don't have any experience and I haven't been around the world long enough. And I would say, let that go. You do have something to contribute, and the sooner that you figure that out, the better. The reason that you're in the job that you're in is for a reason. And you do belong there, and let those ideas come out. And let me also say something. Why do you think we don't like to volunteer our ideas? Anybody, maybe put that in the chat. What holds us back from sharing our ideas? Maybe we have this great idea. Maybe it's an idea for a business. How many people have gone through life and go, I've got this great idea for a business, and you never bring it to the world. And then all of a sudden somebody else makes $1 million doing that exact same idea that you had, that you never had the courage to basically bring it to the world. And so what is it that's holding us back there? Maybe, type that in the chat box. We'll circle back to that, and I'll give you a little bit, some clues on why that might be happening.
Yeah, we've got good ones coming in, Ron. We've got fear of failure, fear of ridicule, insecurities,
Good.
acceptance, right? We want to be
Embarrassment.
accepted, so we stay quiet. Super normal. Not asking for a raise. This comes up a lot when I coach, especially younger women. But everybody, myself included, previous years ago, it's very hard to ask for a raise. It's very hard to negotiate. It's very hard to think that we deserve it. And this is one of the other big ways imposter syndrome flares.
And I would also echo, it's hard for all of us. It does show up a little more prevalent with women, but it's hard for all of us. I have a hard time negotiating salary. So don't feel bad that if you're in that category.
Actually, Ron, you and I have both worked together to negotiate salary with each other. So it's not an easy thing. Avoiding all public speaking. This is obviously, as you all know, public speaking is one of the largest, if not one of the largest fear out there for most business people. And if you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner, public speaking is in your future. I'm so sorry to say, but it's hard. And I love public speaking, but oh my gosh, in the early days, I could not breathe before going on stage. Like, couldn't breathe at all. Imposter syndrome at its height. Public speaking. That's a good one.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that example because it's an example that most people can relate to. Like Tara said, a lot of the research says that we're more afraid of public speaking than death. That's actually not true. But what happens is we identify with it more readily than we actually do death. So that's why a lot of times it'll show up number one on the list. But it's not that we would rather die than give a public speech. But here's the thing. To me personally, it's a tool of excellence to be able to speak well, to influence people, to essentially sell your ideas. As an entrepreneur, even as an engineer, I like to tell my young engineers, you're going to have to do public speaking. I hate to break this to you, but this is going to be part of the deal. And I think if you really want to go out there and make an impact on the world, this has got to be a tool in your toolbox. And again, because there's such a fear behind it, if you can get past that fear, I always like to say that's a differentiator. Because if you get past that fear of public speaking, you are already above. I mean, you're in kind of elite company because most people are deathly afraid of it. And I would echo what Tara said. I used to be, I don't know if I was deathly afraid of it, but I was not good at it and I did not like it. I didn't enjoy it. And with a lot of work and a lot of commitment, I've gotten there. And a lot of work with imposter syndrome and fear. So you can get there too, because trust me, if I can get there, anybody can.
Our last one, turning down amazing opportunities. There's mediocrity and then there's excelling and thriving in life. And when we have fear of failure and fear of rejection, as you all know, as I know for myself, as Ron knows, we've all experienced, we miss out on opportunities and sometimes opportunities we didn't even know were there. But the ones that we know are there, that we turn down because we have that fear of failure and rejection, man, how many of us beat ourselves up for that? And that's perpetuating the problem because now we're beating ourselves up for it, which is just senseless. So that's kind of what imposter syndrome looks like. Let's talk about who gets it.
And let me add one more thing to this. They've done a lot of studies with people, the regrets of the dying. And usually what comes out is they regret not taking opportunities. They don't regret failure as much as they regret not doing something. So when that opportunity comes up and you say, no, I'm not going to do that for whatever reason, whether it's imposter syndrome or closely related to fear, those are the things that at the end of our life, we're going to regret. So go out there, engage. And even if you fail, you're probably going to walk away feeling good about the fact that you took a shot.
Love it.
All right. So earlier we talked about the idea, the statistic that I said, 70%, right? 70% going up to 84% for entrepreneurs. So 70% of people are going to feel imposter syndrome. And this little word cloud is really just kind of giving you an idea. So who does this happen to? Here's a little snapshot. And what I really want to impress upon you as you kind of search this, gaze around and look at all these titles or these professions, is I want you to remember that this is normal. one of the things that comes out of psychology is this idea of normalization. So part of what we are trying to communicate with you is imposter syndrome is normal. Let's normalize it. Let's say there's nothing wrong with you, and you are certainly in the majority. And look at this list, right? I mean, all across the board, we see people from all walks of life. Imposter syndrome doesn't seem to discriminate on who it's going to affect. So again, I think the big takeaway from this is no, you are in good company. You're right there with all the rest of us. All right, let's get into some neuroscience. What do you say? This is the area where I like to, I don't know, I say I like to geek out on this. And so when you think about imposter syndrome, is everybody, let's just start with, what is neuroscience? Neuroscience, just think of neuroscience as, when you hear neuro, think of brain, and just think this is brain science, okay? And so what's going on in our brains when we are feeling imposter syndrome? This is actually pretty fascinating to me, and maybe this will be kind of a light bulb moment for all of you as well, that this is happening, because quite honestly, before I was introduced to this kind of, I'm like, wow, I didn't know this connection, but now that I see it, it's totally obvious. And so maybe as I walk you through this, you'll think the same. I'm going to go off share here so I can see all your smiling faces while I talk about this. So fight, flight, or freeze. Some people will know this as fight or flight. Certainly freeze should be part of that. So sometimes called the 3 Fs. And if you want to have a little fun, if you want to dig into neuroscience like I do, some neuroscientists out there will throw a 4th and a 5th F in there. These are 4-letter F words, one being food and another one relating to reproduction. So I like to say when we're engaged in the sympathetic nervous system, and more specifically, a part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala's job is to keep us alive long enough to reproduce. That's its primary directive. So why am I talking about this in the sense of imposter syndrome? Well, when the sympathetic nervous system is engaged, it is, again, getting the signal from the amygdala that there is a threat. So and type this in the chat box, what threat do you think that our brain, the primitive part of our brain, what is it seeing that maybe we're not seeing on a conscious level? Love that. Lizard brain. That's another way some people will call this the lizard brain. That's a good way to look at it. So what is it seeing? Is it seeing a saber-toothed tiger? Is it seeing, what's going to gobble us up and maybe end our life? Is that happening when we have imposter syndrome? Is our life at risk? Of course not, right? Of course not. Unless, I don't know. I can't think of a scenario when imposter syndrome is actually a life and death situation. I know there are some occupations out there that would be that in that category, but most of the time when we're having imposter syndrome, we're feeling fear of basically our survival. Does that make any sense to us? Why would giving a speech trigger that part of my brain? Any thoughts? Type that in the why would giving a speech trigger a survival response in my brain? I'll let you ponder that for a second, and then I will give you the answer. We are social creatures. A lot of the evidence, a lot of the research says that we are social creatures. Even us introverts like myself, we are also social creatures. And I would say, as the pandemic's gone on, when the pandemic started, I said, "Oh, I'm built for this. I'm an introvert. I can be alone for days." And I realized during the pandemic how much I really do need social connections and other people. And so I think at the very heart of this is that. And so one of the things that's fascinating about neuroscience is when you feel social pain, it's going to light up the same part of your brain as when you feel physical pain. Isn't that interesting? Social pain will light up the same part of the brain that we feel physical pain. So why would the system be built that way? Why is so much significance put on that social connection? The other thing that, this is maybe just a fun fact, the research will say if you have a broken heart, taking Tylenol will help. If you have some social pain, actually taking some Tylenol will help that. So next time you have a broken heart, maybe take some Tylenol and say, thank you, Ron, for making my pain a little less. All right. So again, so what is the deal? Why is the system built this way? Well, here's the thing. Our ancestors were part of tribes. If we were kicked out of the tribe, what did that mean? More than likely, that meant we were not going to survive. That was like a death sentence because we had safety in numbers when we were in tribes. If you were kicked out of the tribe, you're going to have to go fend for yourself, feed yourself, hunt for yourself, all that stuff. That usually was not going to end well for us. So we have this ancient programming that we are very attached to being part of the tribe. We don't want to be kicked out. We don't want to be what? Those things that you put in the chat box. We don't want rejection. We don't want embarrassment. We don't want people to laugh at us. We don't want to give a speech, because if we give that speech and everybody laughs at us and say, hey, you're not bringing any value to the tribe, now we're going to kick you out, our brain thinks that's a threat. Okay? That's a survival threat. And so that's what's going on with imposter syndrome. Much of this is tied to this idea that all those little things, really, is rejection, embarrassment going to kill us? Even if everybody laughs at us when we give a bad speech or a presentation, that's not going to kill us. But our brain is going to try to trick us into thinking that is going to kill us. And we can manage this. We don't have to follow along, right? So that's what I want to impress upon you. Just because the ancient part of the brain is doing that, we want to use this big forehead we have called the prefrontal cortex. That's where we get reason and logic, and we can actually rewrite the story. All right, so that's the important thing. The other thing I want to say is there was a time in history when we thought the body and mind were two separate entities, that they did not essentially talk to each other, and they kind of had their own agenda. And the new science really says the mind and body is a system. They not only talk to each other, but there's messages going back and forth. I think it's easy to see if I raise my right hand, that came from my brain, right? That's the message from my mind to my right hand to raise my hand. But here's the thing that I think most people miss. It goes the other way too. We can have physiological things go on that actually send messages to the mind. And let's say I get sweaty hands, right? If I have a situation where I'm in imposter syndrome, which a lot of times is associated with fear or anxiety, it might get sweaty hands. My heart rate might go up. My breathing might get shallow. My forehead might start sweating. I might feel nauseous, butterflies in the stomach. I mean, we could go on and on with the list, right? You guys have all felt this. These are all messages that are going to the brain that, something's going on here. Threat. There's a threat somewhere. And so your mind is going to start looking for the threat. All right. So I think what I really want to leave you with is the mind and body are feeding signals. Tara's going to kind of expand on this a little bit later. And also that imposter syndrome feels like a survival situation to that primitive part of our brain. So that is a little, I don't know, maybe just a little detour into some neuroscience. Hopefully that wasn't too bad.
How's everybody feeling with that? That's all. It is a lot of neuroscience, and maybe it's something you already know. I know, Carrie and Colleen, you knew about the tribe, right? How are we feeling? Does it feel good to learn about the neuroscience? Is it a little overwhelming? Yeah, it's interesting. But Ron and I are a little neuroscience junkies, so I wanted to make sure everybody's feeling okay. This is Ron's area of expertise too, by the way. He's been teaching neuroscience and leadership for quite a few many years for students at the university and also for entrepreneurs. And so he can get really in depth in it. So we want to make sure that we're not losing anybody.
Yeah.
There.
And let me, Terry, you just made me think of something else. We talk about this idea of normalizing. We also want to demystify. So part of this is when you feel those bodily sensations, I want you to know that's normal. That's your body getting ready. This is actually an increase in arousal. And that's your body getting ready for something. It's either going to fight, flight, or freeze, but it's getting ready for battle. And so when we demystify that, we understand a little bit how the brain's working. So now we go, oh, okay, I know what's going on here. This is nothing to worry about. This is normal. I got it. So that's part of why we go into the neuroscience like that, is to actually give you a little idea that you are working and functioning exactly as you were designed.
Absolutely.
So
Demystifying. Yeah, go, Ron.
I was just going to say, I thought you were going to go into the next slide. I was going to lead you into it.
No, I was going to actually say demystifying is half the battle here. To be honest, it's not just with imposter syndrome. It's with anything that makes us feel crappy, right? I mean, demystifying that this isn't just happening to us, that we're stuck in this pattern, that this is just the way I am. I get nauseous and sick before I go out on stage. That's just my plight in life. Demystifying that that's not your plight, becoming aware that, oh, my brain is trying to trick me here. This is where we can make change. So this is half the battle. And this is what I hope you all walk away with, if you didn't already know it, and I know some of you do, is we can change these things, but the first step is becoming aware.
Yeah. Self-awareness. It's got to start with self-awareness. So absolutely. Once we become aware, then we can reach into our toolbox, because you're going to get some tools, and say, okay, what do I need? Do I need a hammer? Do I need some pliers? Whatever it is. And so how does this show up? So we talk about fight, flight, or freeze. How does this show up in imposter syndrome? And I'm going to let Tara take it away with what might surprise you is how this shows up.
I'll tell you where it doesn't, it's not, is perfection or confidence. So those of you that are like, I'm confident, but why do I have imposter syndrome? We'll get into that a little bit. Confidence doesn't mean that you do not get imposter syndrome. The most confident people in the world can have it all the time. Perfectionism is where I like to start. And this is part of when Ron was talking about fight, flight, or freeze. This is part of the fight stress response. So when imposter syndrome sneaks up into our brain, and we're unaware of it, and we don't know what's happening, we start to evoke a stress response. And one of them that is very typical is perfectionism, right? Now, perfectionism, there are people who identify as a perfectionist, right? They're like a little on the border of OCD, like they actually have an actual identity around perfectionism. And then there are those of us, hello, I'm totally diming myself out here. There are those of us that behave like a perfectionist. And that behaving and trying to get everything perfect and dialed in and perfect and control is a response to when we're feeling imposter syndrome. So that's one way perfectionism can show up. Let me tell you though, this can get a little out of hand, and it can go too far with what's called maladaptive perfectionism. And this is when your standards for yourself, and I think this happens a lot more with our isolation. Your standards for yourself, those around you, your subordinates at work, your employees, whoever, can go too far. And no one can be perfect enough. And that is when it becomes maladaptive and not good for anyone. So again, awareness, for those of you that struggle with perfectionism like me, this is just a stress response that we should work hard at getting over. Here's another one I just thought of from COVID and our quarantine, almost 2 years now. Overworking. How many of you have had problems drawing that line between work and home and find that you're working until like 9 or 10 o'clock at 11 o'clock at night when you weren't before? Anyone? I know my work hours got blended. It was a lot of the people we work with, their work hours got blended. Working harder, working longer hours is part of that perfectionism, right? We're trying to overcome mistakes or lack of skills sometimes. So we work harder. So keep that in mind if you're one of those workaholics.
Does everybody see the connection? Why does perfectionism show up as fight? Anybody, maybe throw that in the chat. Why do we see perfectionism as fight? And I don't know if I'm right about this, but with my background in neuroscience and even my intuition, I'm thinking if I'm in fight mode, I want to win, right? I'm fighting something or somebody and I want to win. And so the best way to win is to be perfect, right? To take it up to, I don't know, an unreasonable level so that I can make sure that I become victorious. So I would say that, and again, that's just my gut feel. That's my intuition. That's what it's telling me. And I would also say I'm one of those people that is a recovering perfectionist. And for all of you that identify as perfectionists out there, you might not like what I'm going to say here, but I would say let go of this as soon as you can. My life has become much better. My stress level, my anxiety has gone down when I let go of this. I don't think this lets us off the hook of being elite or even, really good at what we do. But here's the thing. This is the way I look at it. If perfection is our target, number one, I don't believe perfection is ever attainable. But if you do believe it is attainable, how many times out of 1,000 do you think you're going to hit perfection? So what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up for a life of never hitting the target, all right? Or very rarely hitting the target. That's a whole lot of failure. I'm a big fan of failure, but I don't want to fail that much. I don't want to fail 999 times out of 1,000. And if that's my target, that's kind of the world that I'm setting up for myself. So I say pursue the asymptote. If you know a little bit about your high school algebra, if you can remember that. If not, go look it up on Google if you don't know what asymptote is. But we want to be searching for the asymptote to maybe perfectionism. That's a good, to get close to it, but not quite get there, knowing it's unattainable. So that's my spiel. I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but that's my pitch for you to try to let go of trying to be a perfectionist.
I love what Sean says. I'll let go of my perfectionism once I perfect it. I'm laughing because I totally empathize with what you're saying.
And
it's real, right?
That is beautiful. That should be a bumper sticker.
Oh, I love it. All right. When we go to the flight response, I want to talk about procrastination. And just because you procrastinate does not mean you have imposter syndrome. But we see a lot more imposter syndrome sparking up with the people we work with and students as well during COVID, which we'll get into a little bit later on. And procrastination is one of the things people want coaching on all the time. Ron, almost every coaching client I have says, I am in this procrastination mode. And I'm like, join the club. It is a pandemic thing. There are a lot of different reasons why, but very often we can procrastinate to avoid showing people what we are capable of for fear of rejection or acceptance, right? What does that look like, procrastination? Is it you? Well, do you feel like you're treading water all the time and you're like, I just can't reach the shore. I can't produce my product. I can't finalize this contract. I can't quite get there. Or, and this was me about halfway through the pandemic, are you drowning in your to-do lists? I mean, I had to-do lists in 18 different places of my house, and I was like, what is going on here? That's procrastination at its best. Or here's a good one for entrepreneurs. I'm not ready yet. I need to learn more. I need to research more. I need to do more customer discovery. I need to become better. I'm not ready to tell people what I'm working on. I'm not ready to pitch. I'm not ready. That constant state of not ready. Ask yourself if it's procrastination, and ask yourself if it's tied to imposter syndrome as a stress response.
And I hope, great stuff. And I hope that you guys see imposter syndrome. If we procrastinate, can we see the connection to imposter syndrome outside of what Tara just said? But here's the thing: if we are always planning, or we're always analyzing, and this is going to lead to the next one. But this idea that if I never engage, if I never go out there and try, I can't fail. Mm-hmm. So I can't be discovered as an imposter if I never act upon this. And so procrastination can be this little evil beast that keeps us from going out there and doing something. It keeps us from acting, and because when we act, we could fail. We could be embarrassed. We could be rejected. All those things that we've already talked about. Until we do that, we're safe. And so our brain goes, hey, I want to stay here and I want to be safe. I don't want to be rejected, so I'm just gonna continue to procrastinate forever. And I know a little bit about this, if maybe you could guess. I do this a lot. And again, leading to the next one, I certainly do this a lot as well. Take it away, Tara.
Yeah, when you're going through paralysis, which can take on many different shapes, right? If you get caught up in paralysis of any kind, tell us what that feels like to you in the chat box. I know Ron and I talk a lot about analysis by paralysis, right? We sit and analyze and analyze and analyze and analyze without moving. It's very tied to procrastination. It's kind of where we put our hands over our eyes and we're scared to show the world that we're just not good enough. We don't belong here. We don't know what we're talking about. And then you'll chastise us. That's paralysis. The fourth one, and by the way, the 4 Ps of imposter syndrome, one of the greatest books on neuroscience, imposter syndrome, and becoming your best self at work and at home and as a leader, is by Claire Josa. The book is called Ditching Imposter Syndrome. This book is fantastic. She coined the 4 Ps model here of imposter syndrome, and she added in later on this 4th one of people pleasing. Another topic that Ron and I discuss all the time, because when we're people pleasing, then there's a lot tied to that, especially the way we grew up and when we were children. But I want you to think in terms of imposter syndrome. Think about trying to win the favor of other people so that you feel safe. If they like me, I'm not being rejected. So you're constantly accepting extra work. You're constantly doing things for free. You're constantly giving customers free things when you're like, I shouldn't have done that. You're constantly saying yes and immediately going, why did I do that? It's a lack of boundaries around your time, your energy, and what you give. And when we say yes too often, which, oh, by the way, 57% of entrepreneurs in a study that came out last year showed that they were giving away too much of their time or their product that they were upset about later. I think we can tie a lot of that back to imposter syndrome. So these are 4 ways that it can show up, and most regularly.
Be on the lookout. If you see those things, it might be a clue.
And I just want to say, I love all the sharing in the chat box. This makes everything about this discussion worthwhile. So keep it going. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We just gave you all this icky stuff, right? All these bad feelings and how it manifests. And you're probably like, oh my gosh, that's me all over that slide. Like, that is all me. Am I screwed up? Am I the worst person here? Oh gosh, that's crazy shame. Don't give yourself any shame. No, we all feel it. The good news is
we can do something about this. We're going to start to shift the presentation now to saying, okay, this is great. You made me feel bad, Ron, and Tara. And now how do I fix it? How do I get past this? That's why you're here, right? This information's only fun if it's useful. So yeah, we can change our brains. Has anybody heard of a term called neuroplasticity? If you have any kind of engineering background, you'll know that plastic usually means that something can be shaped or formed. So we have plastic, and we also have what we learned earlier, neuro, just think of that as brain. So this is neuroplasticity, is just think of that as a way to change your brain. And yes, I don't know how old you are, but I can tell you, all of you on this call, on this Zoom call, can change your brains. You're going to learn in a second here that we used to think that adult brains could not change. That has now been debunked, and there's a lot of good information out there. And for an older gentleman like myself, this is pretty exciting. You can teach an old dog new tricks. And so I would say to you, and this might hurt your ego a little bit, but if you're one of those people that likes to say, I can't change, and that's just the way I am, Ron's going to call you out and say that's a cop-out. Because even our personality can be changed to a certain degree. That's another thing that we didn't learn till recently. But that should, after you get maybe that hurts your feelings a little bit, that, hey, that's not a cop-out, I can't use that cop-out. The good news is we can do something about it. And so I could tell you about neuroplasticity. I could probably adequately explain it to you. But Tara and I both found this great video. It's only 2 minutes long, so just hang with us. That's going to explain it way better than Tara and I could. And it's going to use some great graphics. So if you've never heard of neuroplasticity, you're going to come out of this video saying, all right, I got it, because this is pretty clear cut on what this is. And what I want you to do as you watch this, or what I'd like you to do, is think about, as you learn about neuroplasticity, say, how can I use this? Not only for imposter syndrome, but how can I use this in other areas of my life? Because neuroplasticity is incredibly powerful. Once we understand the concept and we can kind of put this, in our toolbox, we can do a lot with it. So let's watch this 2-minute video.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
And I would add, that the research will say that you're better off, and you can kind of see that from the graphic, you're better off replacing a bad habit with a good habit. Instead of eliminating the bad habit, you're better off replacing it. So you just want to carve out some new pathways. And so how does that relate to what we're doing here? We're going to ask you, as Tara said at the outset, we're going to ask you to do some hard things, right? We want you to do some mental push-ups. Those mental push-ups are going to create those new pathways in your brain. One day it'll become easier. Those push-ups that we did, if you had a hard time with 5, I tell you what, you do that every day, those 5 push-ups are going to get easier and easier and easier. And then you're going to be able to do something, even more incredible. So that's kind of the tie-in to all of this.
And don't worry, we're not going to ask you to do any more push-ups today.
You have to do 10 at the end.
Not physical anyway. So how do we fix this? And when we just watched in that video, which if that blows your mind, that's some serious, awesome psychology there in how we change our behavior patterns, but it takes time. That's not something that we say, I'm going to do this for the next 45 days. I'm going to have it locked in. So we want to give you some tools that also you can put to use right away. So we're going to talk about 2 ways to fix imposter syndrome or to manage it. One is going to be full of emergency solutions like, Tara, Ron, I got a big presentation tomorrow. I'm asking for a pay raise tomorrow. My kids are going out of the country. I need an emergency solution right now. We're going to talk about, give you some tools that you can put in your toolbox or on your tool belt to help you fix in the moment and do what we call managing of imposter syndrome. Because here's the thing, you're not a failure if you don't get rid of it. Good luck. Ron and I, when we saw 400 and some odd people signed up for this webinar today, we were like, imposter syndrome? Yes.
Isn't that ironic?
Feel it, right? So it continues to happen, but when you have that awareness, you can manage it. So the other way to do it is going further. And that's into the neuroplasticity realm. That's into deep, lasting change. Long-term solutions that can work to change the root of imposter syndrome so that you're not just managing it when it pops up. You can actually, in my opinion, eliminate it. But it takes time and it takes serious work. So we want you to have both, what you can use in the moment, starting tomorrow, starting today, and what you can potentially take on as a challenge over the long term.
That's Tara's opinion. I don't think it can be eliminated.
We're in conflict on this one. We don't agree. But so what do we think of when we see an iceberg? This is a beautiful one too. For me, and this is a true story, 100% factual. When I used to do a lot of glacier kayaking when I lived in Alaska for a year, don't recommend that, the living in Alaska part. But when I used to live there and do glacier kayaking, I loved it. It was incredible, as long as I could keep my eyes above the surface. Thinking about what was underneath the surface, which we all know, I think it's, who knows the statistic, 90% of the ice sits under the surface. I'm probably wrong on that number, but it was incredibly, overwhelmingly scary to me. I did not want to know how that big object was under the water, how deep it went, how massive it was. So I really had a little bit of a panic around looking under the water. So guess what? I never did. I just coasted on the surface. Because what's under the surface is scary. And I want you to take a minute to just look at this graphic. We'll sit in silence for a minute and digest what you're seeing here before I explain it. When I think of not wanting to look under the surface in my kayak, it's because what's under the surface, as you can see, gets a little more difficult and a little more scary. The two fit together. Above the surface, the white part you see there of the iceberg, and this is another model by Claire Josa, which is brilliant, by the way, in her book, Ditching Imposter Syndrome. The actions that we do on the surface is where we're going about our daily routines, and we're reacting to imposter syndrome most of the time, not even aware that that word is what we're feeling, or not even aware that that's what's bothering us. We just feel fear and anxiety and stress and burnout and overwhelm and depression and anger and frustration. We feel all those things and we're like, this is just my life, I guess. But when we look under to the scary part, there's all that self-talk, and it's usually either negative or positive, what we're telling ourselves, fueled underneath by our beliefs, our secret beliefs of whether I can or I can't do something, which is then fueled by what's underneath that, our values. It's amazing sitting down with new entrepreneurs, which I think I've got a few Boomtown people in the audience. So, you know, we go over what are your values of your company. And it's a hard task. It's not any easier to figure out what your values are. I worked with my own business coach for 6 months to figure out what mine were, not too long ago. Because it's deep under the surface and it takes work. And all of it is fueled by the bottom of the iceberg, which is what a lot of us avoid. Who am I? Who am I? Like, what is my identity? Like, who am I? And all of that from the bottom goes all the way to the top. So if you don't know who you are or your values, or things are out of alignment and you haven't done this work and this awareness, it can really mess with all the actions above the surface. Does that make sense? So when you're looking at this, this is the deep work. This is the long-lasting change that takes time, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, I would say, how many people go through a lifetime without looking, as Tara kayaking in the ocean didn't want to look below the surface? How many of us don't? We go through our lives. That's a great metaphor. We go through our lives and never look deeper to get to know ourselves, because we might find something we don't like. And I can almost tell you, I've done this work, and you're going to find some things you don't like, but that's useful too. That's also valuable. And so to really make this, I mean, again, I know it's cliche and it's maybe a little corny, but to live your best life, you got to get to the bottom of that iceberg, and you got to take a look. You got to understand, who am I? And a lot of my students and clients do an ethos exercise. Ethos is a Greek word for character, and it is really focused in on who am I? And we also spend time doing values, vision, mission, so that we can get a really good grasp on how do I want to show up in the world. And so again, as we look at this, you could kind of in between self-talk and beliefs, if you could draw an imaginary line between those two, that's about where we're saying these, above that would be the emergency situation. The quick hitter stuff that we're going to share with you in the next slide, that's going to be that stuff above, maybe a little bit of self-talk or a little below self-talk. And then that stuff below is the stuff that we can't do in a 90-minute seminar. You're going to have to go out and do that on your own. It's going to take work. It's going to take time. Tara and I, quite honestly, have been working on this for years, and we don't have it figured out yet. But don't let that scare you away. We're a lot better off than we were when we started. But I just want to impress upon you, it's a process that takes a while. Okay?
This is this below the surface is your growth mindset. For those of you that are big on moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, right? It is a daunting challenge, but if you take it as a growth mindset, it can be pretty fun. Now, I want to acknowledge, because I know we have a wide range of people that are hanging out with us today. I want to acknowledge, and I want you to say it's okay to yourselves, because I'm also telling you it's okay. I know a lot of people say, I don't have time to look below the surface, Tara. I got kids, I got bills, I got this, I've got a house, I got
to make my millions, got to start a company.
I'm working on a startup. I can never even find time to sleep or eat. I know. I hear you. I've worked with you. I've been there. At some point in life, make the time. We don't always have the time.
Sooner rather than later.
Sooner rather than later if you can. But anyway, let's go into the above the surface. How do we deal with this if we are saying, I don't have the time? I don't have the time to go deep. Give me some emergency tools. Emergency tools, and I'm sure everyone has heard some form of this, maybe even the word meditation. I'm going to tell you there is, and Ron will tell you too, there's some power behind this.
Yeah, so this is the slide you all been waiting for. This is some things that you can, take a picture of this and say, okay, this is what I can take out of this 90-minute webinar and use right now. And so let's start with box breathing. One of the things I talked about earlier, the sympathetic nervous system is going to be as part of our arousal system to engage fight or flight, right? So we got one side, sympathetic nervous system. On the other side, we have something called rest and digest. So fight or flight, and then we have rest and digest. That's going to be the parasympathetic nervous system. Think of the sympathetic nervous system as the accelerator, and you can think of the parasympathetic as the brake pedal. And so we're basically playing with our arousal. And what is the best way to engage our parasympathetic nervous system is with breathing exercises. If you want to calm down and you want to get out of fight or flight, the best thing you can do is do some breathing exercises. There are several of them out there. I'm going to share one of them because it's what I think is it's very effective and it's very easy. There's another one out there that I've been playing around with lately called 478. You can do a Google search on that, 478. I'm not going to go into that right now, but box breathing. We can do one cycle of this in 16 seconds. And this is one of the things I tell people, if you're going to do a speech, do this before you go on stage. If you can go through one cycle of box breathing, great. If you can do 5 minutes of it, even better. But just go one cycle if you can. So what does this look like? Box breathing is an inhale. So we're going to inhale, deep inhale, for 4 seconds. We're going to hold it for 4 seconds. We're going to exhale for 4 seconds. And then once again, we're going to hold it for 4 seconds. All right. All of that just took 16 seconds. It's like a circuit breaker in our brain to calm us down. There's a reason why, when people are getting counseling on anger management, they're usually going to tell you to do some breathing. And there's a reason behind that. That's because it's, again, engaging that parasympathetic nervous system and calming us down. And again, I hope you see the connection back to imposter syndrome.
Another one is ditching the negative self-talk, right? And it's way easier said than done. There is no magical recipe to waking up tomorrow and saying, that was a kind of cool webinar. Yeah, I'm just going to ditch that self-talk. I'm going to just, positive power of positive thinking, positive affirmations. That's not what we're saying here. It actually, the power of positive thinking alone does not work. And when I say ditch, I'm actually going to say, imagine a big pause sign. If you are getting ready to walk into a room and present something important, if you are getting ready to do something that is causing you, oh gosh, here come those feelings. Here's the nerves. I can't breathe. I'm feeling bad about myself. I don't belong here. They're going to know I'm a fake. I'm not that smart. Everybody else in the room is smarter than me. Just say, okay, I'm recognizing I have some imposter syndrome feelings coming up. Yep. I have the awareness. I'm going to push pause. I can come back to feeling like that later, but I've got to push pause for survival right now. And you literally envision the pause sign and push pause and deal with it later. And that's only in the moment. I do not recommend, nor am I saying, pretend it doesn't exist and you don't have it and push pause forever, because that's not coping. I'm just telling you, in a moment's notice, when you need an emergency fix, do that.
The next one, once we get the sympathetic nervous system activated, we get fight or flight activated, what we're going to want to do is focus on negative things. It's going to be looking for, your brain's going to be looking for threats. And so one of the tricks you can do is just change what you're thinking about. And again, I know this is not as easy as it probably sounds in a slide, but you can do this. And this can be, like we showed in Neuroplasticity, this can become a habit for you. And so again, back to the example of I'm giving a presentation. What are the benefits? Maybe I'm giving a talk to 100 people. If, hopefully you're up there for a reason. There's a good reason why you're doing this. And you have a mission, you have a task. There's something that you are focused on, you should be focused on. And you should look at, what is the benefit from this? Well, you get to spread your message. There might be somebody in the audience that you change their life. I mean, you can go on and on of what the benefit might be from this. Hopefully there's something. Otherwise, why are we doing it? And so focus on that instead of all of the negative, the threats, the anxiety, the fear, the imposter syndrome. All of those things are going to crop up. But I want you to shift your focus away from those. Doesn't mean they go away. What I like to say is push them to the side. I'm going to stay focused on my task, the benefits that I'm going to deliver, and I'm going to push that other stuff to the side. I know it's there, but I'm not going to focus on that. Okay? That's what I would impress upon you. That's a great way to calm yourself a little bit.
We're going to talk about more superpowers in a second. But knowing what they are, I used to literally have them pasted on my wall when I found it hard to talk to people about my superpowers. I had it on my wall for a little over a year. I highly, highly encourage, this is a mental push-up. The more we do it, it gets easier, right? Remember your superpowers, know them, practice talking about them, practice believing them. You are creating a new neural pathway in your brain. That's why these superpowers are so important. And it's tapping into your zone of genius. If you have read the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, fantastic book about using your strengths and ditching your weaknesses, right? Tapping into our zone of genius is where we thrive in life. Really fantastic book.
The next one is kind of related to the last one I talked about is, again, your brain is going to want to focus on the negative. And so we want to put a monkey wrench in that plan, and we want to use gratitude. One of my students once asked me, hey, Ron, how do you get through a bad day? And I'd never been asked that question before. And without hesitation, I said, that's when I lean on gratitude the most. When we are feeling under threat, gratitude can kind of reset us and get us in the right mindset to deal with whatever challenge we have ahead of us. So again, it's this idea of optimism and positivity. Again, we want to look at this as grounded optimism. It's not that we're ignoring reality, but a little bit of, for example, let's go back to, I'm on stage, I'm talking to 100 people, I'm having these feelings, and we could easily say, we could change that story, right? Like imposter syndrome saying, oh my God, I shouldn't be up here, I'm not qualified. Who am I to be on this stage? Or you could say, you know what a great opportunity that somebody has given me the stage to share my ideas. That is just changing the mindset to gratitude instead of focusing on those bad things. Okay?
And remembering what Ron talked about earlier with mind-body connection. What we think is how our body is going to react with biochemicals, right? So if we're thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Oh no, this isn't working out right. Oh, this always happens to me. Why is this happening to me? It's going to release all the bad cortisol and adrenaline. Not that adrenaline is always bad, but it's going to release all of the not so great biochemicals and hormones. If the same situation, our car breaks down, flat tire, same situation occurs, and we choose, mentally make the choice to say, well, you know what? So I'm going to miss that meeting. It's not a big deal. Actually, it's kind of nice outside. I might just walk around till AAA gets here. That is going to release the positive biochemicals. So it's our choice. There's not a lot of things we can control in life, and we cannot control how the body does what it does, but we can control what the mind does. We have complete control over that, barring mental illness. I will throw that out there. So if we control what our mind thinks with practice, it takes time, we can control how our body reacts most of the time. So food for thought. I want to come back to this one because you guys got the quick fixes. I want to come back to going deeper. And I'm just going to touch on this for one quick minute, because going deeper is the long-term fixes that we were talking about. And this is the work you kind of do on your own. But I highly recommend it. You do it with other people. And I will tell you what that looks like. And it could even be other things like your journal, right? This deep part of the iceberg, going all the way down to the bottom, is how we get to our unique value propositions in life. When you truly do the work and figure out who you are, what your values are, and start changing your beliefs, then your unique value is like gorgeous, and you thrive on telling people about it, and it just emanates from you, and it changes everything above, the self-talk and the actions. How do we do this? Time, effort, a lot of reflection, and a lot of opening up and being vulnerable. And I saw in the chat box, some of you are like, oh, but if we look underneath, we could become debilitated with fear. That is correct. This is part of the mental push-up of knowing that that might happen, but with more mental push-ups, you can stop that from happening, right? Just because we don't like what we see underneath doesn't mean we need to hate ourselves for it. So how can we work on this deeper stuff? I'm just going to throw out a list. If anybody has any others, put them in the chat box so we can all see them. You can work with an EMDR coach or therapist or cognitive behavioral therapist, right? These are all out there. You've got life coaches. You've got business coaches. I mean, Ron and I are not life coaches. We are business coaches. We coach a lot of CEOs. This comes up in almost every coaching year that we work with someone, right? Work with mentors, work with family members. What am I good at? Who do you think I am? What are my values? Even just talking through it is opening up that neural pathway, and it's also doing the mental push-ups. And if you're like, I'm not paying for any of that, I don't have time for that, I don't believe in therapy, I don't want to coach, that's totally great. At least the bare minimum, do some research. There's some really great books out there. We've named a few. Journal. Ron actually, I've journaled on and off for a few years, but Ron actually got me to the point where I think I'm doing it at least every other day, if not every day. A lot of good stuff comes from writing our thoughts down on paper. What you're trying to get to are your core values. You're trying to figure out what your own mission and vision is in life. Some ways coaches do this is helping you figure out your 1, 3, 5, 10-year plan. Helping you find your big why, right? If you're, I think most of you are probably a fan of Simon Sinek, maybe not. If you don't know him, look up. Yeah, right on, Stephen. Simon Sinek's Know Your Big Why, right? Knowing our why really starts helping with the tip of the iceberg. And I come back to where we started. This session feels like early this morning. Thanks all for bearing with us. To your superpowers. That list that you did for 30 or 45 seconds, I would love for you to leave it out somewhere. at home, preferably, and add to it. Grab your morning cup of coffee and say, I'm going to throw another one down today. Get that list going. Ask other people. Knowing our superpowers changes everything. It does. I use it in almost every single teaching session I ever do because it's one of those things that we never give thought to and we never share. And gosh darn it, we should. So I want to thank everybody for bearing with us. 90 minutes is a long time, but I really believe when we start this conversation, and I cannot even tell you how grateful I am for everything you've put in the chat box. This is amazing. When we know who we are and how it aligns with our values, it just gives us this immense sense of purpose and direction. And how many of us are missing our sense of purpose and direction, especially, I mean, anytime in life, but especially in the last 2 years. This is one of those things that can help. So we really do want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we're super stoked. Ron's going to tell you how you can contact us if you have any questions, but I encourage you to take all of this and share it with other people.
Well said, Tara. Again, I feel like I should just echo what Tara said. Thank you all. Gratitude for sharing time with us. I know it's valuable. What do we do at Forging Metal? We like to use a model called mental excellence, and you can kind of get a glimpse of the way we do this. And it's really this idea of building a culture of strength, but doing it in a mindful way and really pulling in a lot of different components. You know, we're going to look at neuroscience. We're going to bring sports psychology into it, personal excellence. We have a talk later today on inclusivity, where we're going to have a panel of women. We're going to be moderating a panel of women leaders from the military. We would love it if that's interesting to you, to join us. So this is a little bit about what we do. We are available if you would like to email us, visit our website. We also do a podcast called Forging Metal. Tara and I co-host that, and it's a lot of fun. We get to talk to a lot of people about a lot of fun things and learn from them. So again, thank you for your time. We do hope that we see you again, and thanks a lot. And as you all leave, I'm going to look through some of these chats.
Yeah, I know. Just so much good stuff in here. This is amazing.
Great comments. Thank you all. Got a little meditation going on, healthy breakfast. Mm-hmm. Good stuff. By the way, I didn't mention, for those of you that are still hanging around, we're out of time and we want to be respectful of your time. We didn't get time for a Q&A, but if you would like to email us, if you have a pressing question, you want to fire an email to us, we're more than happy to answer those. So if all 400 of you email us, we're going to be busy, but bring it on. We like to talk about this topic, and we always like questions.